What up, game theorists? This is your boy, Jeremiah. See, I'm trying different intros. I still don't like these.
We're gonna stumble onto one.
I'm going to hit it out of the park one of these times. I think that was it, to be honest with you. This your boy.
Yeah,
So,
this your boy.
that's the kind of content people come to this podcast for. Yeah, so we have a guest this time. Well, you know what? I'll let David introduce her. I don't give a crap about her. Let's be honest with you. You know? No, I'm just kidding. All right, so David, take it away.
All right, this is the second time we've had Michelle on. Michelle she teaches senior level English at a charter school here where I work. And Michelle, why don't you tell us about your gaming credentials?
You know what my gaming credentials are. Zero to none.
You have completed The Walking Dead for our last episode that we did with you.
Mm-hmm.
And any other games that you have brought to completion, to use a delicate phrase?
Brought to completion. Wow.
Sorry, finished.
Well, Life is Strange. I just recently completed. No improvement really between those games. I think David cherished hopes that without zombies lunging out at me, I'd be more able to do things like walk and turn my camera around, but that was still pretty hard. That was still a struggle. But that's okay. I was in it for the story. I was analyzing it as a story, reading it as literature, and from that facet and angle, I greatly enjoyed it.
And basically just had to pretend that protagonist was had cerebral palsy or something.
Her head was just everywhere. It was like her neck was a slinky, or they just attached the camera to a little antenna on her head. It was just bouncing
she had
around.
One of those little spinny caps with the GoPro on it. That was just
very avant-garde camera work.
Yeah, I like it.
Kind of a Blair Witch feel, really. In a lot of sections, even when it wasn't.
Except she's not panicking. She's just walking around in her dorm, and it's like, oh my god.
And I love it how non-gamers all the time, they don't, if you play games a lot, there's, you walk up to someone and you press the button to talk to them or whatever you're gonna do. But whenever you see non-gamers kind of do it, or people who aren't experienced with games, they'll do the uncomfortable guy at the bar thing where they walking around and putting the face backing up, and then they're hey, and you start the dialogue option, and it's all cool. They didn't just perv on you for a minute and a half trying to find the talk space. Yeah.
Well, they didn't just walk up 6 inches from your face with their head looking at the ceiling for 3.
Oh man, you're probably such a weird main character.
I mean, everyone says Max is weird, so I think it worked for me. Maybe they were just she's got her heads in the clouds. No, literally, she's always staring at the sky. We don't know why.
Yeah, sometimes at her feet, sometimes just over your shoulder while she's talking to you.
Okay, listen, I would like to say that I was very open and honest about being incapable of gaming, and David was all, no, anyone can learn to game. You just need the right tools to teach you. And I think he's kind of been cured of that now. I think we're done. I think this is
Ratatouille. Anyone can cook.
Nope, it's not like cooking. It'd be it's not at all like cooking. It's like I don't have basic game literacy. So even the difference between what the game is trying to coach me towards, which I started to pick up more by the end, that is really intuitive for you guys, was really hard for me to understand. There were times when I was just I don't know what you want me to do.
What do you want from me? No, that it seems to be true. For my thesis, I ran a lot of there I go, I brought it up. I ran a lot of people through, and I had them play a game, and they got 5 minutes to warm up with the game, to kind of get an idea of what it was before I collected any data or started the gaming. And what's funny is there were 2 people out of all the people I ran, but there were 2 people who were unteachable. They would hold the controller, and she kept looking at it all close, like it was instructions on how to cook pasta. She's just I don't understand. And I'm like, dude, there's a thumb stick, and she's like, what do you mean? She's put up her thumb. Oh my gosh. And I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm not gonna use your date. Just get the fuck out of here. This is weird. She could have been playing me, just to take the credit and leave, but I don't know. Yeah, that was uncomfortable for the 15 minutes she was there. One of them took the camera. Huh?
I was gonna say David stuck it out longer than that to guide me, so appreciate his patience.
We had 10 hours of that.
You gotta look at it. X is the blue one. Okay, you know what? Just yeah.
The best scene before we get into the game, the best scene was when you're in the diner and you're talking to Frank, the drug dealer, and you're trying to get the keys from him, right? And there's different approaches, like you can try and be nice, you can try and intimidate him. What they want you to do is Groundhog's Day him, where you find out all his stuff and kind of freak him out. So here's Michelle's approach. She walks up to him, and she just like stares him dead in the eye without breaking eye contact as she walks towards him, and then she grabs his beans and just pours them all over the table. And I'm like, whoa, that's a weird choice. Like, that's not a Michelle choice. And she's like, I wanted to talk to him. And I was like, you pressed Bill Beans. That's Bill Beans. You press that button.
Oh man.
I didn't quite get the right, because you have to adjust the camera to enough height that you have multiple options, and I didn't quite have it. So I don't know. Luckily, you can rewind.
He's like trying to be the bad cop, you know? Like, he just walks in there, like, are these your beans? Give me your keys. Just pouring them everywhere.
And I'm the sociopath here. What kind of stone cold killer walks and stares you down at breakfast? Walks in, never met you before, spills your breakfast all over the table while maintaining eye contact. That's some next level shit.
And the best thing was, like, in the end when you're having the flashbacks of everything and all the people in the diner are there, like, and this didn't happen in my game, so they must have planned for this. When she walked by, Nathan, or who was that? Not Nathan. Frank. He was like, "You spilled my beans. Why did you spill my beans?" He was like haunting her with this bean vengeance.
That hellscape. Oh man. Yeah, it was a challenge.
You got through it.
It was not exactly the gameplay video of a lifetime that you'd want to watch ever.
A let's play.
But worth it for the story. I really enjoyed the story.
So before we go into the story, let's just say spoiler warning. If you haven't played Life is Strange, you're going to want to play it. Now, we've talked about Life is Strange before, but Jeremiah and I had only ever played 2 or 3 episodes at that point. So now we've actually finished the game, all 3 of us, in the conversation. So we'll be able to go more in depth. But stop listening and go finish Life is Strange. It's a fantastic game. You should have already played it by now. What's your problem? Go do that.
Yeah, what the hell? You feel bad about yourself.
Yeah, take a moment, feel bad, and then come back.
No, take a long moment. Get clinical depression, then come pay me for my services. All right.
So, overall thoughts. You just finished playing the game last night.
Mm-hmm.
And first thing, you tend to compare it a lot to Donnie Darko. How do you think the two compare?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that the story is paying honor to. Really, there's a lot of allusions. There's a lot of things kind of woven in there. Donnie Darko seemed like a good point of comparison because if you guys haven't seen that, kind of a cult classic made in, I think it was early 2000s. Sounds right to me. And so Donnie Darko does involve time travel, among other things, and basically this idea of how lives are interconnected, right? So these things that seem very small, these interactions between, student and teacher, or interactions between someone, the popular kid and the unpopular kid, right? The outcast. Like, it's definitely a high school drama film that kind of then turns it on its head to think about, if you have the choice to make more people happy, right, by sacrificing yourself or something important to you, what choice do you take? And really, time travel is always about that, right? I mean, time travel the lesson is always don't screw up time. But I think the bigger, deeper lesson there, and the reason why that appeals to us, is because we want to think that even our mistakes are significant, and we love the idea of being able to undo them, but thinking about how even that would have negative effects, right? And that's really kind of what Donnie Darko is dealing with. Like, there are so many good and bad ways that even the smallest decision could go that are going to affect networks of people. So mostly the time travel and mostly the teen drama, I think, are what reminded me of that. So maybe that's just me, but I don't know if you guys saw any comparisons between those two.
Yeah, there is that kind of comfort of, oh, I made a mistake, but if I went back and changed it, maybe something, it's the best of all possible worlds hypothesis, where if I go back and assassinate Hitler, maybe something worse than Hitler would have happened in its place, and we come back to America, and now it's this dystopian Russian superpower that's been conquered by the USSR. So there's, like, time travel does tend to make us feel better about the reality that we live in, because if we do change things, it has unforeseen, you step on a butterfly in the Jurassic period, and who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, there's a certainty, there's a comfort in certainty that, in psychology we know this quite a lot, obviously. It's like why when something's up in the air for a long time and you're like, I wish I'd just find out the answer so I could just put it behind me, they'll say. It's very, having to hold that and like having it recur and not knowing the answer is, is a small bit stressful every time. And so people want to be certain of things. And, so if you can think to yourself, oh man, if I just didn't do that thing, it was great. This is funny because it adds kind of, it's both good and bad because thinking of time this way, that like, oh well, maybe if I would have done that, we would have been USSR, for example, like you were saying, if I would have killed Hitler. It's nice because then you can take a little bit of, there's kind of a psychological concept, and there's obviously a public or a layperson's kind of correlate of it, and it's used the same word, but we're looking at something a little more specific, but it's acceptance, and acceptance being, and there's a lot of different ways to look at the scientific construct, but you kind of get the idea that people can kind of like let things roll off their back. We were looking into how people do that and how to, more importantly, manipulate that for our clients to allow them to do that. Because great, people do it, but how do I get this dude who needs to do it to be able to do it too? So you get some acceptance there because you're like, hey man, whatever's happening right now, it's possible that it's the greatest possible of all worlds, and if I just mess with things, it's just going to screw everything up. But also like makes you realize how moving forward, so thinking of your past, you're like, maybe. Moving forward, though, it can also probably have the effect of thinking of, magnifying even the smallest interactions with people. You know what I mean? So you might think about it more and worry about it more. It's interesting. I'd like to see what would happen to someone in that situation. Like, what's the main girl's name? Kate? No.
Max?
Max. Yeah, wow. It's been a while.
Max Caulfield, which is a shout out to Holden Caulfield and Catcher in the Rye, which you talking about uncertainty made me think that one of the things that I think is so brilliant about this this particular construct of the plot of time travel built in with the characters and their ages, because when do you feel more uncertain than when you're an adolescent? Like there's no greater confluence of unknowns, right, and of uncertainty about your identity. And so really, I love that this was younger characters because it fit right into this genre that we call Bildungsroman. Have you guys heard that word before? Bildungsroman? Okay, so it's a nice German word that we've co-opted into literature. And so
Bildungsroman.
Yeah, of course.
Right. That's the only legitimate way. I'm sorry, I just lost my credibility there. But so the technical definition of Bildungsroman would be a story dealing with the moral and psychological development of a character from youth to adulthood. So it's a coming-of-age story. So
like Huck Finn.
Yeah, Huck Finn would be the most famous American one. Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce. If you want to go into pop culture, even Perks of Being a Wallflower is Bildungsroman. Catcher in the Rye is a Bildungsroman, and even Donnie Darko, really, because it's still about adolescence. It's about, okay, there are so many things that you're trying to figure out when you're a teenager, and that includes where your loyalties lie, right? What are you going to do in life? What are you going to value? And so I don't know if that was like something that people thought was a problem in the gaming world. Like, I don't really want to play as teenage girls, but I thought it was brilliant because it reminds you of those places where you felt kind of helpless and not certain.
Yeah, especially that senior year. When you're on the cusp of becoming an adult. Like Max says in episode 5 that she feels like a little kid trying to hang out with the grown-ups when she's at that art show in the reality where she won the contest. And so it's that feeling of, you always feel at one point when you're a young adult that you're too young to be treated as an adult, but you still want to be in that world.
It's interesting. There's in adolescence, there's kind of a phenomenon that happens a lot. Not a lot. This is characterized by adolescence. Is we run things through our prefrontal cortex, which is like one part of that is the dorsal medial prefrontal cortex, and that's kind of the self-judgment and like insight, or like self-judgment actually, like being able to look at yourself as a self and say, like oh, what am I all about? That kind of thing. Much more of their thinking runs through that dorsal medial prefrontal cortex than when you're an adult or when you're younger. Like, and that obviously the psychological phenomenon of that would be them thinking, oh, who am I? Trying to discover themselves, right? And yeah, I remember thinking that quite a lot when I watched this, and it helps explain like these teen angst that they get all the time, where they're like, "What is my life about?" And I'm like, it's this phase. You'll get over that. Your brain's just developing. You're developing that thing to be able to understand who you are in a society and what your role is, right? That's important. But
yeah, there's a kind of like necessary selfishness, you know, that at least not forever, but that seems to be a really important phase of developing because, yeah, I was thinking about this actually with all of the choices really that Max is making along the way. And they can be as small as, are you going to be kind to the bully Victoria that you spilled paint on? Or as big as Arcadia Bay or Chloe, right? But either way, they're, you know, life, we don't get to do all the good things we feel like we should. You cannot save the whole world. You cannot talk to every person you come across. And so you have to choose to kind of let sometimes those private loyalties guide your understanding of the right thing to do. You know, so I don't know. I was thinking about that choice because there's Huck Finn. Like, of course, it's like really it's a complicated book, but because Huck is a kid, he's able to see this African American runaway slave Jim as someone completely different from his society because he's
and what was his name?
Jim.
Just kidding.
I don't remember any Jim in that book.
Nice bait. Thank you. You guys get yourselves in trouble on air. So he's able to see Jim in a totally different way. And there's this great moment. And because Huck is convinced that the immoral thing to do is helping a runaway slave. Like, he thinks he's in the wrong. He thinks he's going to be judged for this. And so at a certain point, he has this, like, come to Jesus moment, right? And so he's like, okay, I will write Jim's owner and say there's a runaway slave and I'll return him. And then he starts thinking about all these memories that he has with Jim. He starts thinking about all their time on the river, on the raft. And then he tears up the letter and he says, all right then, I'll go to hell. Meaning this abstract sense of like utilitarian morality, what's best for the society, is less important to me than the love that I have for my friend and that the love that my friend has shown me. And maybe that's wrong, but I don't care. And that's the choice I found myself making when it was Chloe or Arcadia Bay.
Yeah, and they even preempted that with a literal walk down memory lane as you went through all the stuff you and Chloe had gone through for the 5 episodes right before that decision, sort of creating that Huck Finn reminiscence moment to make that choice more meaningful.
I'm going to be straight up honest with you. I never read Huck Finn, so...
Get on that.
I somehow went through... our school system sucked. I never read that. I didn't read Catcher in the Rye. I read Great Expectations, but we didn't read
And The Awakening.
Yeah, so many things I didn't read that people talk about, and they're like, well, you know those books you have to read in high school, and I was like, oh, no, I'm from Arkansas, we don't read good, so as few books as possible, if you don't mind.
I would love a psychologist's opinion on Holden Caulfield and Catcher in the Rye. That would be like a gold mine, so you should really consider reading that one. But that one's a little... I mean, it's the same thing with a different variation because, and this is where I think it has overlap and why Life is Strange played homage to it. Catcher in the Rye is a lot more about authenticity, which is another big teenage thing, right? Like exposing hypocrisy. Like you start to kind of figure out that the adults around you aren't perfect,
They're
right?
phonies.
That, like, switch flips, yeah. And so the phonies are what Holden always calls them. So there's a lot of that running through Life is Strange too. I think of, you know, Max trying to navigate, okay, who's real, who's not, who can I trust, who don't I trust.
Speaking of that, is it not fun to be you and just know stories so well that nothing is surprising? Because episode 1, we're playing, and Mr. Jefferson, the cool teacher, I'm like, oh, he's a cool teacher, like me, and I'm on board with Mr. Jefferson. And she's like, no, fuck that guy, he's evil. Don't trust him. I'm like, you got that from a lecture on photography?
Never, as David Madsen, the character, said, never trust a grown man with a goatee.
Huh. No, I didn't see that one coming. I can't... See, I just don't... I get maybe that's just kind of a specialty thing, because whenever I watch a movie or read a book or play a game, I never make parallels, ever. I'm just there and I'm like enjoying it, I'm soaking it all in, and I'm trying to turn off my... Like, I'm infamously... overly kind to movies. You know, I said Batman versus Superman was a good movie. Let's put it that way. I was like, yeah, I liked it for what it was worth. You know, it's two big guys punching each other. I mean, what'd you expect out of it? You know, it's not going to be Batman Christopher Nolan style. It's going to be this, you know, it's like watching WWE, but you know, with superheroes. Anyway, why am I justifying that? The point is I never draw parallels or criticize them. But when I interact with people, 100% of the time, I can't turn it off. I can't help but like when a parent talks to their kid, I'm like, don't do that. That's wrong. That's not the right way to do that. The kid's gonna stop listening. Whenever they call their name twice or 3 times, I'm like, you've now trained them to turn around on the 2nd or 3rd time. Same thing with dogs. Like any person or human or any animal, if you train them to turn around on the 2nd, thing. Like right now, my dog, I did it on accident. My dog, I go, you want to go outside? You want to go outside? And the second time I does, then he shakes because then he's like, oh, he did the double outside. Because sometimes I'll be like, you want to go outside? And he doesn't respond, and then I don't do the behavior, which is getting up and letting him out. And so now I've trained him. When I ask twice, I'm serious about it. I'm going to go open the door whether he wants to go out or not. You know what I mean? And so over time I trained him that the second time I say, do you want to go outside, he goes. So anyway, I can't turn this shit off now. And when people interact with each other, I'm like, no, you probably need to just answer that person. That person needs to be validated at this point. Just say something like, oh man, that sucks, before you go into some diatribe of how that relates to you or whatever, you know what I mean?
So you're watching them like psychologically self-destruct, but powerless to help them.
Yeah, because they don't want that shit. Nobody wants to be like, excuse me, I'm a psychologist, so I'm going to let you know that you're harmful to your child. They're like, get the fuck out of here, It's unwanted advice. That's my job, unwanted advice, pretty much, actually. Yeah,
I have my moments of that too, actually.
So you can't switch this off when you watch movies and play games?
I mean, I can. Can I? No, I don't think I can. Sometimes a story can be so good that it does it for me. So there are stories that surprise me, or there are things that I can tell, like, what's going to happen, but not how.
Give me an example.
Okay, so, like,
Jesse,
I just finished Breaking Bad. I just finished Breaking Bad, and so I knew the general direction that was going to happen with the characters, and I knew, spoilers for Breaking Bad, turn it off here and go feel bad about yourself for not finishing it, and I knew that Walt was going to die. I just didn't know exactly how that was going to play out, and I hadn't read anything or heard anything. I just knew that was where the tragedy had to go. So it's kind of like, I don't know, because you're talking about seeing it because you've been trained in it for so long, and so I think that that's all that it is. It's kind of like a not on this level, this is going to sound really self-aggrandizing, but like if an architect looked at a building being constructed, they'd be like, okay, they're going to have to do this. There are only 3 possibilities of where it could go. Like stories have structure. They have to be good. It fills the pattern. Like when you go way too far off in the weeds, you end up with like the worst of the Christopher Nolan films because he's trying to be anti-pattern, and in doing so has actually made it worse. He's made it incomprehensible. So it's not that they're cliche or predictable, but there are clues along the way. And like the final choice with Chloe and Arcadia Bay, that one I didn't figure out at the very beginning. That was what, David, that was like half an hour before it happens, somewhere in there?
Yeah, like sometime in the beginning of episode 5, you were like, wait, are they going to make me choose between her and Arcadia Bay? And I'm just smiling like, I don't know, keep playing.
Yeah, I knew that was coming. And then I got mad. Then when they were like really clearly trying to set up the choice of like, look at all the people in the town that you're talking to and going to murder, I was like, stop it. This is a dumb choice. So,
Yeah, that's interesting. So, can you think of a movie where you have been surprised by the ending, where you're like, "What in the hell?" Sixth Sense. You ever seen that?
Big Fish?
Sixth Sense.
Oh, totally different. Yeah, I mean, I was like 12, but.
Oh. Yeah, well, I mean, I guess that was a while back. I
what about Citizen Kane with the rosebud thing at the end?
I wasn't exactly talking about Sixth Sense per se. I was talking about like Sixth Sense, but yeah, no. Yeah.
Like a M. Night Shyamalan twist?
Yeah, okay. There's so one of the directors who did a couple of episodes of Breaking Bad, and he's going to be doing one of the Star Wars films, Rian Johnson. He was kind of an indie darling before he started getting involved in some of those bigger name productions. And so he wrote this great movie called The Brothers Bloom, which is kind of like a twist on your typical con movies, like Ocean's 11, right? But up more. And that one did surprise me. That one surprised me quite a bit. So there are a couple, yeah. But it's like, but again, like stories follow patterns. It doesn't make them bad. It's not like they're cheesy or cliche. It's just that there are certain ways that things have to go to feel satisfying.
Well, that's how I feel. Do you watch Game of Thrones, or did you read it?
No, I do not.
You're an English teacher. You have to read for a living. Make it fun. It's awesome. Why not?
It is good. I haven't. First of all, I know that it will suck me into a whirlpool. Will never escape. Like
One thing about Michelle is she's good at story, but she's very susceptible to despair that comes from stories. So like watching Breaking Bad was like having her teeth pulled out one at a time. Like she can't turn off her empathy for all the darkness that's in these stories, and so Breaking Bad, Game of Thrones, like these kind of like darker, like grim, realistic. Up the first 10 minutes.
What the hell? The entire
No.
the entire cinema, like everybody in the cinema
No,
after the in Up, I looked around and I was like, we were all like, what the fuck? I didn't come here for feels. Like it was just anyway. Go ahead.
See, I am actually like that. Actually, would affect me a lot less than a Breaking Bad. It won't affect me unless it's incredibly well crafted. So the more I hate movies about animals or slow people triumphing against the odds. I hate those kinds of things because I feel manipulated. I'm just like, stop it. You're going to play music at the right time, and you're just going to try to make me feel bad. And, like, my stubbornness is stronger than my feelings. So my desire not to be affected kicks in. But, I mean, yeah. So Game of Thrones would be really rough because I know that they're just, murdering the characters one at a time, and that George R. R. Martin is trying to shock you. So, I mean, and also, like, I know that I know myself, and I actually binge read. So if I sat down and started reading them, I would never come out. All the things I'm responsible for, like, I just stop paying my bills. I'd just be in a pile of George R. R. Martin books. So that's the other reason I haven't gotten into it so far.
Okay. Well, I was trying to make a parallel, but I guess you can't. But I'll make it with David. So this will be fun. I have a feeling I know how the whole thing's gonna end, but I don't know. But I'm starting to realize how it's gonna get there, and it's losing some of the awesomeness now. You know what I mean? Yeah. There's still some like cool moments that happen where I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. I didn't see that coming. But so now I'm starting to think that that's just how people who study this stuff see this, and it seems like a joyless field of desolate.
No, it's not though. It's not because, and I was trying to tell David this because actually one of my students knew that I was playing Life is Strange, and he told me a couple things that happened, and David was like, oh, that's so frustrating. I was like, no, good stories actually don't just depend on plot, because a good story, at least in my aesthetic judgment, is about character development. And that means there's a lot of things that fill in the gaps, and especially this story. Like, one of the things about Bildungsroman is that they're usually not as linear as other stories. Like, Huck Finn is loosely connected by a series of adventures on a raft, right? And this one companion.
I don't know. I nodded.
Let me give you the spark notes, Jeremiah. Also, seriously, it's a great book. You should read it.
The Audible version has Elijah Woods narrating it, just saying.
Oh, man, I like Elijah Wood.
Yeah. So there's options. It's a great one. It's a great American work. But in Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, which is like James Joyce kind of pioneered this stream of consciousness style of writing, because for a long time, right, authors tried to filter out the in-between stuff that wasn't important. Like, well, whatever. Like, most of us wake up and then we think about what we're going to wear, and then we, get anxious about an email we didn't answer, and we brush our teeth. But all that stuff is boring. So let's just go straight to the high points, right? Straight to like the cut scenes of life. But James Joyce, when he was writing Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, deliberately included these small things. And I don't know, you've heard this term thrown around, but in literature, the word epiphany is really important, right? So we use that to mean, well, what do you think? Like, the definition of epiphany, if you had to define it.
Like an aha moment?
Yeah, like an aha moment, right? Like a sudden realization.
Lightning just struck my brain.
Just right. You got a little hand thing. Struck my brain. Okay. But Joyce
kind of used epiphany to be small moments that end up having monumental significance. So, like, for you, Jeremiah, it might be this, the day after you finish your dissertation and your kids are off in the distance playing on the playground, and, like, Amy's, in the house doing something, maybe working on some paperwork or whatever, and you just have this realization of, like, this is the good life. This is it. And so it's this tiny, tiny thing that most directors would probably cut out or not include in a script. And Life is Strange is full of those moments. I mean, it's very much about, like, you can lie in the bed as long as you want listening to music with your best friend, because it's not just the tough choices that we make that make us who we are. It's these interactions, it's these moments that we then look back on later, right, and realize are part of our, like, personhood or our sense of identity. So I was really impressed by that. It felt very stream of consciousness with those. What are some of the other, like, slow moments? Like, I guess sitting on the swing, you can, like, hear memories.
You can sit down almost anywhere, like in a lot of places, like a bench, and she starts talking to herself, you know, or thinking out loud. Well, thinking in a soliloquy that's in her head. I don't know what the word for that would be, but just, you know, thinking, and you can hear her thoughts. It's pretty cool.
Little inner monologue moments throughout the game where you get to know the Max better, and then just a lot of inconsequential conversations you can have. Like, you don't have to have 80% of the conversations in that game to make the game progress. You could just zip through and do a speed run, but you can just stop and you can, you know, hey, watch out, they're gonna throw a piece of toilet paper at you. Yeah, they're weird. Whatever. Hey, you going to the party later? So, like, you can talk the guy into going to a party who's sitting by the tree. You can.
Yeah. I like that a lot about this, and I like it in other games too. I like to. You know, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, you play something like Tomb Raider, and I know you haven't played that, but it's this, like, it's an adventure game that, like, you know, you're running and things are crumbling under you, people shooting. You know, it's a lot of these, like, whoa, it's like a Michael Bay film, you know, in some spots, and I love that. But I guess I'm wondering, like, how do you have these epiphany moments or whatever you were calling them, and then you also worry about pacing? Because I enjoyed myself with Life is Strange, but on some games I've been like, you know, I was like, what is the deal? What are they doing? Like, maybe it didn't seem meaningful. I don't know.
Yeah. The epiphanies were, so you got frustrated by them?
Not in this game, but in some games, something similar. I don't know if it's the same construct, but I would be like, you know, I'd be like, oh, this game is dragging on. There's no purpose in it being slow here, maybe?
Yeah, like with pacing, how would you compare that with The Walking Dead, which was a similar genre of game, but totally different story and different pacing? Like, you didn't have many, like, do this right away or something bad's going to happen moments.
Was that question directed at me or Jeremiah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Either one. You guys both played both. So, like, Walking Dead, similar situation, but a lot less time to stop and smell the roses, per se. Like, how do you think that translated into a game experience?
I think that's by virtue of who your character is, though. I mean, I think that's the whole point. Like, Lee is an action hero. Of course, like, and also when I guess the world is ending in both games, to be fair. But the world is ending more slowly in Life is Strange. It's not like there are things jumping out at you to grab you. And, I mean, when Jeremiah brought up that adolescence is a time when you're particularly self-reflective, when you're filtering everything through identity, right? And you're taking selfies all the time, like Max Caulfield is, right? But that is an important part of development. And for Max, that is actually where the way forward lies. Like, she is a 90-pound wet, like, 17-year-old girl. And so her next option is not going to be running under a bridge while it explodes. Like, her next option is actually putting the pieces together about what's happening around her relational intelligence. You have to use other means to solve the puzzles because you're not huge. You can't beat off Mr. Jefferson, you know?
No, you can't.
No, you shouldn't. Definitely shouldn't.
Did not beat that man off.
Yeah.
You said it, man.
I mean, if that were an option, I don't think you should take it. But luckily, the game didn't make that an option.
Throw this out.
All right. So when you're trying to solve these puzzles without beating off any of your teachers, like when you were. But part of what makes it a game and not just a story are these puzzle elements that make you sit down and think through, and most of us gamers get a sense of satisfaction for figuring out, like, putting together clues. Like, remember when we had the board up and we were looking at license plate numbers and GPS coordinates and, like, timestamps on messages? Like, that was deeply satisfying for me. Although some of the puzzles didn't quite land. Like, I was just like, I don't know, I'm just gonna try things till they work. Like, but overall, I found I had a lot of satisfaction with those puzzles. But you, as someone who's not really into the gaming tropes and kind of learning video games as a second language, was that more like a roadblock or like a place where the story just ground to a halt and you stopped having fun, or did you find some kind of intellectual satisfaction in those moments where you weren't beating someone off physically, but mentally beating them off?
That was a setup. So roadblocks, I think, would be the good metaphor here. I did find those a little bit, but I mean the whole experience is a roadblock. Again, it would be this whole experience is like if I had a third grade reading level and you handed me Anna Karenina. I mean it's so beyond my skills and my ability to be able to like walk in straight lines. And again, not knowing intuitively some of what the game wants me to do, right? So that was some of the frustration. I think I don't even know if you can properly call them puzzles, but the piece that I found the most satisfying was the choices that you could make to get characters to open up to you. I thought that was really interesting. So like I like the puzzles of dialogue option, because when you go and like try to get the information from Frank the drug dealer, for example, like you need to get this cranky guy to give this stuff to you, right? And he's not budging at all. And then in the first run through, the dog runs out and bites Chloe, and then Chloe shoots him, and it's a mess, right? So I probably rewound like 5 times because I was like, I know there's a way to win him over and to get him to come to my side. So those were the parts I found most fascinating, when it was kind of like apply your social intelligence, right, and see what happens as a result of you knowing certain things about certain characters or remembering what actions you've done in the past that they might call you out on. Don't try to be a hypocrite. So those I thought were the most entertaining and most fun. Going in like the endless circles in the dormitory nightmare was not super fun for me, but a couple other puzzles. And you went and found all the bottles for me, because that would have taken forever.
Yeah, that bottle thing was when I mentioned some of the puzzles didn't quite land. Like that was clearly them trying to pad out the length of that first episode. Like find 5 bottles, enjoy yourself finding bottles. And it was frustrating as hell the first time I played it. And even when I played it with you, I could remember where most of them were, but it still took us a while to find it. And luckily, the game did a shout-out that you noticed in Episode 5 when she's going through the nightmare reality that is like all the fragmented timelines, and she sees a random bottle, and she's like, wow, I really must be in hell. There's a bottle. So even I feel like the developers were kind of giving us a nod, like, yeah, we understand that was a bad puzzle.
That's funny. Dialogue options in general. So there's a technique that we learned in psychology, and it's in applied psychology, clinical psychology, where you
shock people when they. Oh, no, go ahead.
Just shock the shit out of people. No, where you can get people to do things, or you can get people to, kind of go places with you. If you need someone to go somewhere uncomfortable or whatever, and it's called motivated interviewing. It's a series of things, or like you get a court-ordered person to come in to do therapy. That person's gonna be like, all right, whatever, do your thing. I'm not gonna answer any questions, and that we deal with those people. And so there's every time I have a dialogue option, I'm like, none of these all suck. Like, why don't you? First of all, a lot of it is it's almost all questions. Like, because people, by asking a question, there's a part of your brain that when somebody tells you something, if it's adverse to what you want to believe, then you can see it as a threat, and our actual autonomic, nervous system can fire off and be like, no, fight or flight kind of, and you just shut off anything from that person. You might even look at the person angrily. You've probably been angry at people from something they're trying to shove down your throat, or beat you off, and but the interesting thing is if you ask questions, it's permissive, right? In fact, this is one of the questions you can ask right away. You'd be like, is it all right if I ask you a question? And you've already asked it. You've got them, because they'll be sitting like this. They don't want to answer, and they're like, whatever, go ahead and ask. And then you've already got them engaged, right? It's sort of like the high-pressure salesman who tries to get you to say yes to anything. They're like, well, have you ever needed something that was dirty cleaned? And you're like, don't be a jack. Of course I have. What? I can't say no to that. That's impossible, right? And so the same thing here. And so a lot of those times I'm looking at those dialogue trees and I'm like, I don't. Or the person responds and I'm like, well, that's fine. No matter where they go, I can get them out of it. But the character is more limited in their options than I am. It's frustrating because I'm like, well, don't say that, idiot. Of course they're going to get upset,
It's the same thing as, like, verbally, Max Caulfield does not have psychological training, and it's the same reason you can't just go and use your jujitsu on Nathan, right? Because though you, the player, knows that skill, Max does not. So you're really, part of the role in role-playing is you have to put yourself into the skill set of somebody who's not that good at fighting or talking or psychology.
And that's so difficult, like in RPGs, like, Michelle, have you ever played RPGs, like tabletop RPGs? Mm-hmm. Oh man, you'd like that. That's a lot of this stuff, like the dialogue stuff. But in there, I find myself being overly nice and being, asking questions of people a lot to get them to open up, and so it's hard for me to play a limited, because I played a grunt in one of them, and he was just like, got the gun, and he's like, well, let me ask you a question. How would you go about finding? That's not what he would do. He'd be like, hey, give me the answers. All right, fuck you then, and leave. Not realize that it's an option, that he could still get the information out, even though the person said he didn't want to.
Mm-hmm. So, well, and you're limited even in the dialogue options by what can appear on the screen. Like sometimes it's as simple as a single word, right? And you have no idea how the character is going to present it. So you can choose to bring up 3 people, and it just has their name written there, and you don't know if it's going to be confrontational, you don't know if it's going to be, very placating. It just depends. I mean, that was kind of frustrating at times, or sometimes.
Yeah. Like you're trying to talk Kate off the roof, and one of the dialogue options is like, my favorite memory, and you're like, oh, that'll be nice. You click on that, and she's like, my favorite memory is when we were all laughing at you for putting that video up on the internet, and you're like, no, that's not where I thought she was going to go.
Yeah.
It was something like that. I killed Kate Marsh. I killed her. I did not on purpose, but I chose the wrong options. Which, to be fair, both of you guys were able to save her, right? You were able to talk her down from the roof?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think that the options, statistically, I think it's stacked against you.
Yeah,
I think that you want you to feel trapped, right? Mm-hmm. And so David gave me such a hard time about that. I just have a bad track record with teenagers and roofs.
Yeah, because you dropped Ben in The Walking Dead.
I dropped
It's like anytime there's a teenager about to fall off a rooftop, Michelle's going to make that happen in these
somehow. She's like, I'm okay with this option. I'm going to justify this somehow.
No, it was terrible. Well, and like and that's the point of the story where your rewind powers don't work on purpose, right? It's a lesson there of these things are sometimes beyond you. And so I could have gone back and restarted the game, I guess, or just gone back and erased that choice, but I didn't want to cheat. I don't know, that felt like cheating to me. So I was like, no, I'll take the consequences. I'll see what happens. So that was where my kind of storyline varied from you guys.
Although in the end she's dead in both of our stories.
That's true. If you blow up Arcadia Bay. Actually, I think that the timeline jumping, she ends up dead no matter what, because Jefferson burns the photos, which are your time travel mechanism. But that's the thing, okay, can we talk about the name of the town? Can I tell you guys what I know?
Yeah, Arcadia Bay is a weird name. When I first played the game, I thought it was just some hipster bullshit because it's like a hipster town.
Yeah. It is a hipster town. It definitely feels like the Pacific Northwest. So Arcadia is like one of those terms or one of those words that has meanings like utopia, or it should anyway. So utopia means like a perfect society, but Arcadia in classical literature represented an ideal that is away from the city life. So there's a story, I think it's Romans or something, were traveling and they stumbled in on this perfectly isolated town, right, that was nothing but shepherds. So you have the idea of the pastoral ideal, the simple life, away from all this noise and clutter. And so there's a very famous painting that's riffing off of that. And so the painting is by Nicholas Poussin, and it's like a 17th century painting. And so it's all of these shepherds in this beautiful landscape, and they're all looking in kind of bemusement at a tomb, and where clearly someone has been buried. And so the saying underneath it is "Et in Arcadia ego." So that translates from Latin to "even in Arcadia I am." And the speaker is death, right? So even in this ideal pastoral landscape that's removed from the city, death is still there. And so anytime you're talking about Arcadia, that's actually usually the point of reference is that particular painting, because even in this beautiful world, you're not going to escape that aspect of mortality. And I think that was very much one of the lessons of this story too. And again, is a lesson of coming of age, right? There is no way that from the moment that William walked out that door and was hit by a car, the lives and storylines of all these characters were irrevocably altered, because that's what happens. Death changes story. And so I love the idea, even though it was really dark at times, of no matter how you navigate growing up, you're going to lose someone in some way, if not to death, then to moving away and not texting you like Max did to Chloe, or to to drugs by their own choice, or to violence and the lust for power. You have to navigate with through things that are beyond your control. So it's not just establishing your identity, it's coping.
And teaching undergrads, I can't tell you how many grandmas die every finals. So yeah, I can see that.
There's a big rash of them.
Yeah, huge batch of grandmas every time.
Anyway, any listeners that
let them not take finals,
keep
right?
your grandma safe during finals week.
Keep her safe, man. Dude, my grandma did die during finals, and I felt like I was like, this guy's not gonna believe me. He made me get a death certificate. I was like, that's fucked up. My grandma just died unexpectedly. She fell down and hit her head on the concrete and died. Like, it was totally unexpected. And I was like, that's really shitty. And he's like, yeah, you need to bring me a copy of the death certificate. And the thing is, I didn't. I forgot because I was up there, I don't know, mourning. But and then I came back. I was like, oh my god, I forgot it. He's not gonna count my final. He let me take it early. But no, he ended up doing it anyway. But yeah, anyway, mortality though. But it is honestly, adolescence is in like neuroscience and psychology, it's considered up till about 23. Your brain is still growing, huge, steps that are happening. And so, yeah, even in college or, they're in, I guess, high school, but still, adolescence is kind of that whole period. Yeah.
Right. Well, because it's that juxtaposition of you feel invincible, right? You feel like there's, the stupidest thing that you can do is going to work out great for you. And we really see that with Chloe because she's such a reckless character.
Yeah.
She really embodies those passions. She doesn't overthink. She just acts, right? And yet, by Max constantly seeing these other realities play out, constantly rewinding to save Chloe from dying again and again and again, right, is seeing that, okay, no, there really is this kind of cause effect that you have to take into account. And again, I think that's a lot of what adulthood is. It's just, a lot of it is impulse control. It's just like, all right, I'm going to hold back, even though I think I'll never die, because actually I could make choices that affect other people negatively, and that could be a problem.
And to me, that was the Donnie Darko connection I had when I played it, is this element, this idea of thwarted fate and how the universe tries to fill the vacuum of what should have happened. So, and it's been a while since, it's been, 15 years since Donnie Darko came out and I saw it, so I might be hazy on this, but isn't the central problem with Donnie Darko in that he should have died but he didn't?
Yeah.
And so that's Chloe. She's the Donnie Darko character in this thing, and that she should have died at the beginning, and then everything that happens from there is the universe trying to rectify that mistake by killing her in some way, and Chloe going back and starting a new timeline where she's still alive. So you have all these fractured timelines that she's just been jumping out of where Chloe's dead. And so this whole idea of, in order to set things right, that death that was owed to fate or to death or to whoever has to be paid in Arcadia. Even like, here I am in Arcadia, I'm Death, and I'm claiming Chloe. And so that makes the ending decision so dramatic. And this is what I love about games that movies can't do or books can't do. Like when you watch Donnie Darko at the end, he makes it right by going back and dying like he should have, and then saving the rest of reality. And that's a very satisfying ending. But in this game, you have two options for equally satisfying endings, I think, and it puts the onus on the audience to decide which one is the ending they want to experience and which one they want to see play out. And so I was in a fuck Destiny mood, and I was like, no, whatever. I'm keeping Chloe alive no matter how many timelines I have to shatter. And so I went the other way, and instead of setting things right, I just destroyed the town and let that play out. But I had to own that decision. That was on me. Whereas if I was a passive audience member, I would have had to just experience it.
Satisfying isn't the word that I would use for those endings. I think they're both equally awful. Like, I was personally very frustrated when I figured out that was the choice. Because the thing with Donnie Darko is he sacrifices himself, and all of those other people are going to be okay. Like, the end montage is like all these people in the town who he's affected tangentially waking up in the middle of the night, and they don't know why they're upset. Like, some of them are crying or they're just startled because, like, something has happened in the fabric of the universe. It's a great montage. It's a fantastic piece of film. But in this case, sacrificing your friend or everyone else that you know, love, and care about.
Yeah, because you're not Donnie Darko. You're Donnie Darko's friend, and it's up to you to make that decision. It's such a intensely, just from a story perspective, like, I love those Sophie's Choice kind of dilemmas where there's no right answer, and you just have to see what the character would choose. And so for me, what informed that decision was how I'd been playing Max up to that point. But it's, I don't know, I find it, yes, frustrating because there is no third option. No matter, like Michelle was joking about how long would it take her to get a degree in computer programming so she could program an expansion to the game where there's a third option that you could sacrifice yourself. You know, it's like those people who, when you're giving them the dilemma of like, would you push the fat guy in front of the trolley to stop it, or would you let 10 people die? Like, they're always trying to find door number 3 where it's like, no, there's got to be another way. What if I jump in front of the trolley? It's like, no, you wouldn't stop it. Well, what if I do it with a bunch of rocks in my pocket? Or, you know, whatever. They always try and find this way out of that dilemma, but trapping somebody in that dilemma, because sometimes life only has 2 choices and you have to make that decision. I found that way more emotionally interesting because it put that in my lap as a player instead of just letting the writers decide which way she went.
Yeah, me not thinking about anything when I play games or whatnot, I was just like, as I'm running up that hill, you know, you see that big tornado, I was like, I was approaching it like I would a MacGuffin, I guess. You know, I was like, whatever's up there is what's gonna fix this. I don't care. You know, the storytellers have something they're trying to do up there.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
The lighthouse is important. I just got to get to the lighthouse.
Yeah, it's the same thing. When, you know, as a soldier, you know, you do the mission. It doesn't matter what happens. The mission is that hill. You take that hill, right? And it's that kind of idea I put in my head. I was like, no, listen. You know, in a time of crisis, it's best to take everything a step at a time, right? Like, look at your next step. And so for me, I was like, and so when I get to the top, and then they're just kind of fucking around for a minute, I'm like, what are you doing? But then you have to make the choice, and I was like, no! It just hit me like a ton of bricks. I was just staring at the screen like this, going, no! And the thing is The Walking Dead gives you a certain amount of time to make the decision. This one, you could have as much time as you want. I was just like, yeah. I got up, I walked away, I walked around in circles for a while. It was just like, what the hell, man? Like, I just felt so crappy that I had to make that decision. But it sounds like you kind of knew that was coming.
I did, and actually, like, that made me, it's such a crappy choice that it made me feel less bad about it. So, like, like, Kate Marsh I felt terrible about because I knew that there were other options, but I was like, that is such a dick move to make that your final choice. Like, I don't feel bad. I'm going to try to distance myself from it. Yeah, and just, I mean, I really thought about the stories that satisfy me more and tried to mimic it. And so in general, I find that utilitarian kind of distant reasoning of greatest number of good for the greatest number of people doesn't satisfy me, like, aesthetically. Yeah. And I'm not even sure that that's always the right path. And that's, again, like, that's why I think it's so important that this whole genre, Bildungsroman, of coming-of-age stories exists, because you realize at a certain point of your life that there aren't right choices. There's no right job. There's no right person to marry. Like, we think it's these black and white, you know, but really it's choices, and it's the way that you justify those choices to yourself, and it's what you choose to prioritize.
Yeah.
So
I like to, my wife listens to these podcasts, so I like to throw that in every chance I get. That you probably didn't hear me. That perfect person to marry, definitely David. Yeah. If I was gay, that'd be the way to go.
Yeah.
She'll be listening to this driving the car.
There's got to be a timeline. Like, we just got to go back in enough photos and find that timeline where we're both gay, or at least one of us. As long as at least one of us is gay, we can make it work.
Quadriplegic, you know, and you're like, worth, you know.
I come wheeling in. I'm like, oh, Jeremiah.
Wait, so how did you know that the teacher was evil, though? That one, when that happened, I was like, what the fuck? I didn't at all see that.
He is a good-looking male teacher that seems a little too close.
Whoa, rude. Rude.
Sorry. My sensors went off. I was alarmed.
So when you first met me, did you think I was going to murder somebody?
Yeah. Well, but
I did not. I did not see you interacting with students the way that Mark Jefferson was interacting with Victoria Chase, because clearly something was going on there that was not appropriate.
See, I thought he was
not just because Victoria's the worst.
I thought Adam pegged as like I didn't have him pegged. I don't think through these things, but I was like, oh, he's a mentor for this character as she goes through this weird, awkward time. She's kind of the staple while she's looking for Chloe, or he is. Sorry, he's the staple, this corner man, kind of to push you on. I don't know. I didn't see that coming.
I was also really unimpressed. He was kind of a jerk about something that Max said. I think Max, I didn't, because one of the first challenges you have is giving, once you figure out you can rewind time, is giving the right answer to one of his questions. And I didn't have the right answer because I hadn't done the reading, and he was a total jerk about it. And I was just, maybe that's just overly sensitive as a teacher. Like that's not okay.
See, I thought he had that cool rapport, like Keeker I do, where we just kind of make fun of students who are dumb, and they're cool with it. Because he's like, Max, I see you hiding there and trying to avoid my gaze. Turn in your thing. Like that's something I would say to a kid who was like avoiding turning in a project.
If they were actually avoiding it, though, but Max is a genuinely shy and self-effacing person, and you would neither you nor Keek would do that to a shy kid. And that's the problem. There's a difference. Like, I have kids that I will call out for being bozos when they're dumb, like, especially because they're sometimes doing it on purpose for attention. And that, like, yeah, don't put up with that BS. I get it. But someone like Max, who clearly hasn't done their reading, who doesn't feel like they don't fit in, that has just been dropped in, you don't expose them like that. I'm trying to actually get her to put herself out there. It's not going to work if I make fun of her every time she takes a risk. That's just not sound. So I don't know. I was very unimpressed. I like the information.
Poor pedagogy, therefore serial killer.
No. I also, and I didn't, to be fair, I did think Nathan was more involved than he was. So I wasn't totally predicting it, but I knew that he wasn't trustworthy. Because there's a lot of options that you have dialogue-wise to trust him more, and I was like, nope.
You knew David Madsen was a red herring pretty fast, but you thought it was more of a Nathan thing.
I did. I knew David Madsen was a red herring for sure because he's misguided. Because he's misguided. He's earnest. Like, he's not evil. The zeal with which he applied his task. Mm-hmm. If he were a criminal, he'd be much more calculating and careful. So
especially
I could tell
once they went into his, like, I was a war vet. Things were so much simpler in the war. You're like, oh, all right. He's just having a hard time adjusting to civilian life.
Well, how did you distinguish between that and, like, just would it not make an interesting story if that was the villain?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it'd be super lazy if, like, the guy who is especially because it does have mystery elements, right? This type of a story, you're trying to figure it out, you're trying to solve the clues. And so if, like, the guy who happens to be the big belligerent bully in episode 2 does turn out to be the bad guy, that's almost never how it works mechanically. Again, that would be like seeing a major move in architecture, like, okay, you're going to build a 3rd floor without building a 2nd one. It just doesn't follow that pattern. It wouldn't be satisfying because it'd be too obvious. It wouldn't be a puzzle. So yeah. But anyway, Mark Jefferson I was just unimpressed by him. Also, I think this is terrible, but he, like, had his shirt all the way unbuttoned. I was like, button your shirt, dude. Like, that is not okay.
Professional. You might as well be raping and serial killing.
So just so you know, if your shirt's unbuttoned, that's automatically what I'm assuming.
Wow. She's very suspicious. Now, what about the mechanic of text messages? I thought that was the first game I played where I could receive text messages from characters on the phone. Like, how did you like that? Did that take away from the story? Did it put you more in the teenage mindset, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, I liked that. I was intrigued by that. It was hard for me on a mechanic level because, yeah, you know how well, obviously, I'm going to sound like an idiot here because I don't know what I'm talking about, but obviously in games sometimes you have, like, a map to reference, you have, like, your set of tools, like, there's all these things that are taking you away from the main story, but I don't know how to do any of that. I'm lucky if I can walk from point A to point B. So it was a little distracting on that regard, just like anything would be, where I'm stopping the action of the story to check something else. But I liked it. I mean, it definitely added to the sense of threat because Nathan was adding threatening text messages. I mean, I really didn't like it when Chloe would tell me to hurry up because I was like, hey, I'm walking into doors as fast as I can, Chloe. I'll get there when I can. I just suck at games. But yeah, I don't know. I thought it added an interesting element. It wasn't as big of a player as I thought it would be. I thought it was going to be more clues oriented, but it was actually more character oriented.
It was more just like 98% of the text messages you get aren't important. That's kind of how I felt. Like, if you're a teenager and your phone is full of 100 text messages, there's probably 5 of them that you needed to have, and the rest are just kind of like, hey, what up? You want to go ape at the drive-thru?
Monkey shines.
Speaking of going ape, when we last spoke about this game, our guests that we interviewed, the Glassers, were not very impressed with the character of Warren. What did you think of him? They found him to be somewhat entitled and felt like he deserved Max's affections more than he actually did. Well, what were your impressions of Warren?
I was fine with Warren. I mean, I felt kind of bad because I just didn't have time for him. The world was ending. You know? Stuff I had to do. It wasn't personal. I don't think he was actually that entitled. Like, he got a little bit mopey sometimes, but more from not understanding, I think, than from being pushy. Like, I didn't find him aggressive about that because he ended up taking that other girl. He ended up taking Brooke to the drive-in, and I thought that was great. I was very happy for Warren. So I mean, good for you, buddy. I'm gonna go try to stop the whales from dying, but you go watch that movie. Like, it was more, my annoyance with him was not because I felt like he was entitled to Max, especially not after he saved me from a beating twice. Right? It's hard to really be mad at someone that's taking the fall for you like that.
Yeah, he's just got perpetual black eyes for most of the game because he keeps getting.
Oh, exactly, because of me, right? So I mostly felt bad. I was like, listen, we'll actually have a conversation when I'm not running around trying to reverse time. But
and you did give him a kiss at the end of the world, like that superhero girlfriend, like kiss for good luck moment.
Yeah, you know, and it's a good thing because then I killed him. So, and everybody else.
Ultimately,
but I can say, I kissed you in another reality.
The ultimate mixed message.
You're welcome. You're welcome. No, and actually, okay, so one of the things that I thought was really funny, did it happen in your guys' game too, that Warren was in that hellscape with everybody else, like kind of yelling at, when she's navigating through the hellscape, there's all of these people, like Principal Wells is there, David Madsen is there, Warren is there. Was he there in your storylines too?
Yeah, he was for mine.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, yeah. Which, again, I really liked because, like, so that end scene, as much as it was freaky, it was everyone's expectations and the way that she had felt like she had let them down. And so you have the pressure, you know, you have David Madsen assuming that she's a bad kid. You have Principal Wells assuming that she's a bad kid. You have Mark Jefferson suggesting that, you know, she really wanted bad things to happen to her. Like, all these characters are
she's not living up to her potential.
Right, exactly, yeah. And so it reminded me in Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, which is, again, that James Joyce Stream of Consciousness novel. He is, like, in growing up in turn of the century Ireland, right? And so there's all these pressures about, you need to be a good Catholic, you need to be a good Irishman and hate the British like you should. You need to be a good son and raise our family out of poverty. You need to be XYZ, like all these things. And actually, I have a quote that reminded me of this end scene. He talks about the voices, right? So it says, he had heard about him the constant voices of his father and of his masters, urging him to be a gentleman above all things, and urging him to be a good Catholic above all things. When the gymnasium had been opened, he had heard another voice urging him to be strong and manly and healthy. And when the movement towards national revival had begun to be felt in the college, yet another voice had bidden him be true to his country and help to raise up her language and tradition. In the profane world, a worldly voice would bid him raise up his father's fallen estate by his labors. And meanwhile, the voice of his school comrades urged him to be a decent fellow, to shield others from blame, or to beg them off, and to do his best to get free days for the school. And at the end of the novel, like, those voices come back, like all of those different pressures that he can't possibly live up to. And he actually ends up leaving Ireland to become an artist. He says, you know, forget it. I'm not going to worry about Irish nationalism or fixing my family's poverty or all these things that people think I should do. I'm going to try to find and create my own identity. And so I actually liked that final step of the story leading up to that choice was actually about blowing off all those other concerns that she'd had for 4 episodes, right? Because a lot of times you have these dialogue options of just trying to, like, defend yourself or explain yourself, but Max gets progressively braver and braver through the course of the story, or at least she was how I was playing her. She gets a lot bolder.
Yeah, like through the mechanics of trying to avoid those pressures, like you're literally trying. It was a stealth part of the game, so you're literally trying to avoid these characters who are manifestations of these pressures she's under, and that translates into the game as like you actually trying to dodge them. And people were actually noticing that of Max's character throughout the week, because the whole story takes place during 1 week, and they're like, wow, something's weird about you. Like, more than one character remarks, like, you're different, something's weird. You're bolder, you're more assertive, which I just assumed it was like, oh yeah, if you can rewind time, you get bolder. That's part of you're less risk averse when you can go back and fix your mistakes.
That's funny. I took it more as like a battle hardened, like, you know, veteran kind of thing, because I remember when people were saying that, I was like, I've seen some shit, guys. Like, you know, that's what I was thinking that Max was probably thinking. I was like, well, yeah, she's man, you know, like when your best friend's like, hey, will you murder me? You're like, what the fuck? I mean, that has a way of like kind of making you grow up a little bit and you know, not sweating the little stuff as much. There's nothing. Oh man, I cannot tell you. Whenever you get back from war, there's nothing more nothing that feels shittier than getting into a regular job, because somebody's like, guys, this is super important. Our sales tomorrow, and you need to get all these jeans to those jeans, and you're like, that is not super important. Your life's a joke if you think that's important. That's what you think, and that's why so many people come back salty. And I was the same. I got into this program, and they were like, hey, it's patient information is confidential. They've got a whole law about it. I was like, that's not confidential. No, secret documents are confidential. What the fuck's wrong with you? And then I got in trouble because of it, actually, because I kind of shat on it. But yeah, that's kind of what I thought. I was like, man, I think maybe she's getting more brash because she's like, this shit's not important. You know, the real stuff is kind of what's going on in the background, and I don't know.
Perspective, right? Well, because at the beginning, like, there's so many great details in this story. There's a lot of really great clues. Like, even in the final episode, when the storm is coming, the Two Whales Diner in the sign, all of the other letters have gone out except for D-I-E.
Huh.
So the sign says die when the storm is blowing through. So there's a lot of really careful, interesting details. But like she is wearing a shirt at the beginning that is like a deer, and it says Jane in front of it. It says like Jane Doe, right? And you know, and she wears a couple of other different deer shirts. By the end, she's wearing like a moth shirt, like a butterfly shirt. Yeah, but I mean, Mark Jefferson. Yeah, Mark Jefferson is always, you know, saying like, oh, I'm so interested between the transition from innocence to corruption. Like, you're all doe-eyed when you come here. And I think that's the whole point. Like, Max at the beginning of the story is doe-eyed and overwhelmed and quiet and withdrawn and passive, walking down the hall trying not to, you know, get anything thrown at her. But then by making these choices, right, by kind of being willing to face the death of her best friend's best friend, right? Those kinds of things make her into that everyday hero motif that's running through it. And at the end, like, Chloe, in that final confrontation at the lighthouse, Chloe's basically saying, like, even if your powers don't work, even if you make what you think is the wrong choice, like, you're awesome. You're a good person because you're compassionate, because you're kind. Not because you're going to, you know, save the world or save me. Those are not the things that give you value alone, even though those things are certainly important. So yeah, she gets braver, she gets perspective, she becomes hardened by watching many people die and undoing it, right? Yeah, it's great. I really enjoyed it. I mean, it was stressful. It was less stressful than Walking Dead. At least I was less anxious about zombies jumping out at me. Though I don't know. Yeah, being asked to kill your quadriplegic best friend was not exactly a walk in the park. That was plenty stressful.
Yeah,
do you remember what choice you made with that, Jeremiah?
I didn't kill her. I was like, because in the game, so I thought, what if it was David? Because and you know, I was like, I mean, because whenever you're playing a game, it's a lot. It's kind of like the same effect you get whenever you watch like a zombie film with one of your friends, and they're like, well, obviously you should kill that guy, and I'm like, right, you're pulling yourself out of the, you know, you don't have any love for that person, right? That's a nobody on the screen. You can easily detach. But then I'm like, yeah, but what would I really do? And so I was thinking about, I was like, man, dude, yeah, there's no way. Like, even if he was like, please kill me, I'd be like, man, that's fucked up to ask me. Get someone else to kill you. I'm your best friend, bitch. I'd have to live with that shit. That's horrible. Like, even if I knew it was the right thing to do, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't physically kill someone. I just couldn't. I'd be like, you know, unless they're a bad guy or something. But anyway, yeah, unless they bug me.
You'd have to become a bad guy as a quadriplegic, just so you know you're.
I'd be like, Jeremiah, kill me. Also, I murdered a puppy.
Yeah, you just pull a puppy over to you and gnaw on it. I'm like, oh, just morphine here.
Yeah, that was actually the hardest decision for me in the game, because there were 3 dialogue options. There was like, okay, no, or I don't know about this, and so I chose the I don't know. I was like, I don't know, this is messed up, sell me. So she like talked me into it, and she was just like, you know what, I'm dying, There's no stopping that. It's going to be slow and painful. I'm in constant pain, nonstop. I'm on morphine all the time. My parents are going bankrupt. I just had the best day of my life with my best friend. I want to go to sleep and let this be the last day of my life. And I was like, oh, shit. And I just let the game just sit there. And I called Jeremiah, and I was like, Jeremiah, I don't know what to do. And I kind of like walked around. And it took me about an hour before I finally worked up the nerve to kill her. But I was really like it was one of those things where in my head I've always thought it was like the ethical decision, like the right to die. But when I was faced with it, when there was somebody I cared about through the proxy of Chloe, that's when I was like, oh man, this is where my morals actually meet my, like, you know, where the rubber hits the road, to steal the expression. Like, it's, oh yeah, I know in my head that's what I should do, but it's so much harder when you're actually put in that situation. Like, is that really your moral code, or is that just the moral code you tell yourself you have?
Right, exactly. Well, and that's where it really was, David, you were talking about, like, with that final choice, especially, you know, the game doing something that a novel or a film can't. And that's where I will definitely cede, because when we talk about, like, you know, the moral decision of Huck Finn to say, all right, then I'll go to hell, like, the problem is that with the history, the distance of history, right, kids read that book and they're like, well, of course I'd make that choice. Like, I'm not a racist. I'm not a bad person. Like, those ethical quandaries that were a lot more difficult for our ancestors are very easy and very obvious for us. And so I thought it did a really nice job kind of bringing in these real issues that teenagers are navigating, and just that all of us are navigating, right? Statistically, we will know someone who's either very depressed or suicidal. And so how do you deal with that when you actually don't have control of the situation and you're going to feel like something's your fault, right? Like, it deliberately, like, the game strategically stripped your power at certain points so that you would have to wrestle with, maybe there's not a right answer, and maybe you are going to have to just do the best you can and try to be the best person you can given those impossible odds. Right, you get a superpower, your life is not going to be great. Like, you know, there's going to be difficulties and hard choices.
And that brings me to my last question. I don't know if Jeremiah has any more, but one thing that was interesting to me was anytime there's a superhero story, because it's a Bildungsroman with superpowers, so you have to add that trope to the mix. And one of the fun things is, what would you do if you were gifted with extraordinary powers? And we see this contrast between Chloe, who her reaction is, you could make out with everybody and nobody would know you did it. Like, that's her first reaction, is like just spontaneity, like this, to bring some Freudian psychology into it, because Jeremiah is a huge fan of Freudian psychoanalysis. But, you know, like this ego, superego thing, right? Like this, you could just do whatever you want, and if it doesn't work out, you can rewind. That's Chloe's reaction. Whereas Max's reaction, if you remember her, like when you're in her room, she's looking at all these books and like, oh, I can just read all my books now. I can just be the most well-read person because I can keep rewinding time and read another book. And so she has more of the cerebral kind of, I want to become more educated with my time powers. Like, with you in practice, just because you're kind of clumsy in the game and maybe in real life a little bit, like, you end up using a lot of your superpowers to stop breaking things that Max would accidentally break. So what I want to know is, for both of you, if you had the ability to rewind time, how would you abuse it?
Oh man, Jeremiah first.
Oh, remember, I'm a sociopath on this podcast. You don't want me first. No, yeah, I don't know. I mean, honestly, like, it's like that. It's almost like that situation with Chloe of I don't know. I know theoretically what I'd do. Theoretically, I would just, yeah, you could do anything. You could, like, go to your worst enemy and just, like, beat the fuck out of them. Like, just wake them up and be like, surprise, motherfucker, and just beat them up, and then rewind time, and then just stare at them and be like, I could have beat him up. I just did beat him up, but now I don't have to any of the consequences. And so I feel like I just, you know, do stuff like that. I don't know, but in practice, could I really beat the shit out of someone who's sleeping there? I don't know. I mean, maybe not. I don't know. It kind of depends on what they did to me. But stuff like that. You know, it's all those carnal, like, passions or things that you have where you're like, you know, or fuck it, man. Maybe I eat some cake and I'm like, oh, man, I don't eat all that cake. You. And I'm like, still feel awesome, you know. But I don't know, like, any of the bad decisions that you would have made, you know, like just going off on someone, like if someone's being a bitch, you can be like, you're such a bitch! What the hell? What the hell? Like, you know, all those things in your head that you're thinking. Or, no, I would use it in therapy for sure. I'd be like I would just tell them
the right dialogue option.
Yeah, I would just be like, you're the only client I hate. You know? And then just go, because You got
Yeah,
those.
just like when you're teaching a class and you've got that class clown, you're like, hold on a second, you just punch him in the face, and then you look down and be like, that never happened.
Just Spartan kick him, walk up and just be like, boom, and he just goes flying. I would do those things for sure. I'm pretty sure because think of the example I told before at the beginning of the show, how my son was hurt, and I was like, gulp, gulp. I could barely even hold back my, the fact that I knew that was the wrong answer, but it was hilarious. Yeah, I'd probably abuse the shit out of it. A lot to my own self-humor, probably.
Right. I think what you would do is similar to what I would do is that because this is how we went through life in college, is we just saw the whole world as one big kind of behaviorism experiment to see how people would react. And so we would just do the craziest things just to see how they would react if a monster leapt out at them, or if like somebody started like acting like walking backwards, or stared at the wrong wall of an elevator, just weird things just to see what people would do. I feel like we would just do that, but like turn it up to 11. Yeah,
I put a lawn chair in the elevator and just sat there, and it was on a Saturday, and I just went up and down, and it was like ding. I'm like, hey, what's up? You want something to drink? And they're like, no, I'm good. And some people thought I was insane. Some people were cool. They're like, oh, that's awesome, man. You're just gonna sit here all day. I'm like, maybe we'll see. And then other people were like, they'd be like, I'll wait for the next one. I'm like, it's fine, man. Come on. I didn't bring a second chair, but fucking with people. I think it's hilarious. It's the best part of life.
Wow. Yep. Okay. So you'd do the social experiment side of things. Fair enough.
Yes.
Like maybe spilling beans on someone.
That would be hilarious. Walk into a diner and do that,
and then just walk out.
Make sure when you open the door, you look around like you're trying to find the person. So you're like, you try to look around, and then you lock eyes with that person, like, oh yeah, there he is, and then walk up because the person will be like, what is it about me that did that? Oh my god. You gotta make sure you're looking for someone so that it wasn't just a random act. This person wanted to fuck up your breakfast, like it's just
you in particular.
Yeah, and you're like, what the hell? Oh man.
It was such a mistake. I was so panicked. Sometimes that happens too. Like sometimes in Walking Dead, like my like I would push the wrong option, right? Like my finger would slip or whatever. David's cat would walk across the keys or whatever, and I was like, oh no. So yeah, I mean, I think in terms of how I would abuse that power, I think, okay, I don't know if this constitutes as abuse. If not, I'll give a better answer, so you don't make fun of me.
I think just ground rules. I think anytime you use that power, by the nature of what that power is, we're abusing it. So just go nuts.
Good. Okay, that's fair then. So like, I am someone that really doesn't like to take risks, and so I think I would actually use it to see how different scenarios would play out, so that I could then make the best decision, right? So, like, which is kind of what I did with Warren at the end. Like, in the last option, at first I hugged him because I kind of like, I didn't have time for the guy. So I was like, all right, I won't be a jerk about it. But so I hugged him, and I was like, no consequences, can do whatever I want. So I rewound and, like, kissed him, and I was like, all right, that went okay. Like, he's not, like, thinking we're going to get married after this, so that's fine.
Which is what usually happens when you kiss someone, so I can see why that would be a
I don't know. You guys are the one who said he was kind of entitled. He looks like he's 15. I don't know what's going through Warren's head, okay? So anyway, I chose that option, and it was fine. And I was like, that's kind of a good superhero send-off. I like that. So I think I'd probably get pretty stuck, right? Because I'd be trying to make the perfect decision.
Yeah, I don't think you'd ever finish a day. I think you would just Groundhog's Day the same day over and over again, Bill Murray style.
I'd be like, oh, my pedagogy could have been so much better. Like, all right, caught that guy
every
talking.
Class like 7 or 8 times. You'd be so exhausted.
That's pretty weird because just a few minutes ago you said you don't believe in right or wrong, but you're saying
no. That is not what I said. That is not what I said. I said that the process of growing up is realizing that you can't always do the right thing, even when you want to. And I've accepted that. I've come around to that. Don't try to therapize me on air, Jeremiah. Don't try to fix me.
But you just admitted you have crippling anxiety that you would use a superpower to get around.
We're all having like wish fulfillment, and Michelle's like, I would get rid of my crippling anxiety.
And she's like, man, if I talk to someone on the bus, what would happen? I'm just gonna go crazy. I'm just gonna go with power.
I'm gonna ask a different leading question in my lesson plan.
Yeah.
Actually, I'd probably use it to like get all my grading done, right? So that I could then have my time clear to watch Netflix without responsibility,
Oh,
right?
when you finish grading, it
That's
goes back
pretty
to being
good.
ungraded. That's rewinding time.
Yeah.
But you can watch all
Oh
the
no!
Netflix you want first. I'm surprised your mind didn't go there. You could watch all of Netflix and then rewind it.
You can, I don't
You
know.
went right to
indulge.
grading, which is impossible when you're rewinding time.
Uh,
I'm really bad at fun. Um,
She's like, I would
Okay,
produce a lot of work.
I, I,
I might use it to go crazy. Like if I knew that my actions wouldn't have consequences, who knows? Maybe I would. Maybe I would just like shout down a student, like go back in time, right? Because I would know that.
crazy. I said I'd straight up Spartan kick a minor, Michelle. Like yelling at a student is not.
She's like, I would lose my mind and possibly my temper.
Oh, man. Awesome.
All right, listen. Maybe that's because, like Max Caulfield, I'm just used to thinking that if it came to a physical confrontation, I would lose. Most of my students are about a foot taller than me and probably about 50 pounds of muscle more than me. So, I have this rational response of not even imagining that I couldn't reach to kick them. Wouldn't happen. I have to do a roundhouse or something, and that would just end with me hurting myself. So.
Dude, this is the least exciting thing to have in his superpowers since Frodo got the ring. I mean, a hobbit? Come on, man. Like, he could do anything with that ring. Look what Sauron did with it.
No, it's like Samwise's fantasies for the ring. He's like, I'm going to be the ultimate gardener. That's what I'll do with ultimate power. I'm going to grow a really nice garden.
I'll use it to get out of awkward social situations like Bilbo at his 111th birthday. It's like, oh, that's not what that's for.
So we established that Michelle is a hobbit.
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty close. That's not a bad comparison.
Well, any
But if I knew I could have adventures without consequences, then I'd be fine.
Yeah, you'd be a wild and crazy dwarf. Just like a mug of ale in each hand.
Oh, yeah, I can see that. It's like being like the loudest person. We're like, hey, be quiet. Jeez, you're going crazy. Probably not.
So any final thoughts or comparisons or reflections you want to make about the game? Your second game you've beaten in your life. It's a big milestone.
I mean, yes, with a lot of help. Yeah, no, it was great. I really enjoyed it. I actually really loved the music. I really loved the soundtrack, which I don't think we talked about at all. But that I thought that added a really nice flavor. And the idea of like music is so much a part of our lives now, right? So often we do have headphones in, or the first thing we do when we go home is put on music to kind of fill that space. So I liked those details. Yeah, there were a lot of layers. I mean, my only regrets are the people that I didn't talk to, in the game. There's a lot of interactions that I passed by, or I failed to water my plants. Do you water the plants? Do you remember Max had a mom?
Yeah, my plant died too.
Hey, I got mine. In real life, I can't do it. I've got a dead plant in the window, but
my plant died, and the hobo I never talked to died.
Oh.
I did feel bad about that. Yeah, seriously. But yeah, no, it was great. I really enjoyed the levels. I thought it was really clever. A lot of very, I think, deliberate literary parallels. If I were looking them up, certainly Caulfield. That's too distinct.
Yeah, that's not a common
deliberate reference.
Like, I don't know, they were Caulfield.
Yeah.
Huh.
Right. It was great. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
How would you rank it compared to The Walking Dead?
I will not rank it. I feel like 2 is not a whole lot of games as a sample size.
It's the simplest ranking I could ask for.
Oh man, no, I can't do it. I think that I enjoyed the story more than Walking Dead. I think Walking Dead entertained me. I think Walking Dead entertained me more because it was just a lot faster paced, and there was that kind of that anxiety circled around to actually be kind of fun in the end because it was exciting. I was always geared up for a fight. But I think that I got a lot more out of contemplating the themes of Life is Strange. So this is much more of this was much more the work of literature or that kind of artsy film that you'd watch, and Walking Dead was more your summer blockbuster.
Yeah, it's a good comparison. One of them's like an indie film with an indie soundtrack, and the other one's more of a, Michael Bay movie.
Right, exactly. So, yeah.
And were you able to? Did you find yourself more immersed in the character of Max Caulfield, having at one point been a 90-pound girl and having never been an African American professor of history?
Yeah, it was pretty easy for me to think it inside of her head, for sure. And even just like, I think you guys talked about this in one of your previous podcasts on Life is Strange, like the I live my life scanning for threats, knowing that I can't physically overcome the obstacle. And so the minute that Nathan sent a text message to Chloe and to them saying, hey, come to the junkyard, I was like, that's a trap. Nope, that's not going to go well. So yeah, I think it was a lot easier for me to identify with Max than Lee. Lee was really fun. Like Lee, I think was a glorious spree of imagination, right? Because I could do all the things that I'll never be able to do, never. And Max was much more. It felt like an extension. She felt like an easier character to play. I still found myself with that divide. I still found myself with that sense of I don't think Max would do that because I'm a lot more outgoing and bold than Max is. But there were times when I de-escalated situations and was much more passive because I think that's how she would play it.
It's interesting what it says about gender and race in that you were more. It was more realistic for you to be a high school girl with time travel powers than to be a normal man.
No, that's true. I actually I was quite the opposite. I was like, oh my god, I can't. Like as a guy, you're like, whenever you get that text message from Nathan or something, I'll be like, yeah, let's show up, let's see what happens, man. Are we gonna throw down? You know, like who knows? And you may lose if you're in a fight, but it's not like you're just gonna get completely overwhelmed. But yeah, like, but as her, I was like, what the fuck am I gonna do if he shows up and wants to fight, like, and he wants to physically punish me? Nothing. Like, all I could do was not go. You know, so yeah, it was very interesting.
Right, exactly. Or wait for someone to show up. Like, I mean, it was and I really appreciated this actually. Like, I appreciated that they did not give Max unrealistic physical abilities because that's really frustrating. Like, that's not necessarily feminist. If like all of a sudden this 90-pound girl who clearly is not a violent person can beat up everybody. Like, that's not empowerment.
That's Joss Whedon feminism.
Yeah, the super wave image, right, exactly. And so I actually really appreciated that they kept that realism while still finding ways to empower her. Like she very clearly had agency over her own life. Some of her dialogue options were plenty sassy, right? And so she found other ways that made sense, right? But David had to come rescue her.
Yeah, but even during that scene where David's rescuing you, you have ways because he fails the first time that he rescues you. It's with your interference that he's able to pull it off. Like you trip the cord out, you like kick a thing over there, you warn him about the gun.
Yes. And that's what Mad Max did so well, actually, was like, hey, not everyone in that is going to be Furiosa because that's just not possible. But this, everyone's going to do what they can, even if it's less effective. Like, we're all going to work towards a common goal instead of like being Buttercup and the Princess Bride and just standing around uselessly, right? So it's that in between. So yeah, I really appreciated that. And so it was a lot easier for me to play that part though because yeah, that's being afraid of those threats and knowing you won't be able to get your way out of it. That's pretty common, unless there was like a pepper spray option that I missed that Max had in the game. But I didn't see one, so maybe they can think about adding that for the future, so you have a little bit of a weapon, a fighting chance. Yeah, but I think given how hard it was still to walk in straight lines, given that I think that's probably the least gameplay game that there could be. My gaming might not progress beyond this, but it does show that this story stands up, right? It was enough to pull me in like a good novel would, even though I can't game. The themes and the ideas and the choices, that's something that people are going to want to return to again and again and discuss, which is awesome. Like, that's the qualification of good art. If you can return to it, knowing what's going to happen and still find new stuff, still find new things to explore and value, then it's going to remain kind of in the canon, I guess you could say.
Well, good. Yeah, I guess we pretty much wrapped up that idea then, which is good because we're coming right up on time.
Cool. So. Well, thank you, Michelle, for coming on and going through 10 to 12 hours of frustrating gameplay and rewarding story.
Yep. And
yeah, That about sums it up. Frustrating gameplay, rewarding story.
Yeah, but and thanks to all listeners and for tuning in for another week, and we'll see you homies later.